Hi everyone, welcome to Augmintech. So today we are going to learn about a very important topic, that is design thinking. This is something that will come in handy when you're designing any sorts of an interior or an object or just a visual. This kind of a thinking, if you develop this, you are automatically a good designer. When people come and ask me that do I need to, have a good drawing skill to become a designer? That might be partly true, but you need to be a good design thinker to be a design enthusiast or an interior designer or a graphic designer per se. So, let me tell you what design thinking is. Design thinking refers to the critical analysis that we do whenever we see an object or a space. It is referred to immediately starting to think of problems and solutions, starting to think of improvising a certain aspect of an object, or trying to modify a place to a certain extent to create something new. So that sort of quick thinking on your feet and that signs of starting to create something new, that is what we call design thinking. So, in any kind of design, if so, for example, when I'm talking about interior design, when you enter a space, you kind of realize what kind of space this is. You start to analyze spaces. You start to analyze where is the door, where is the window. That's the first step. And then, referring to the things that you have already analyzed, you will start to build on that. For example, you have two windows in the same room. Now, two windows mean you have a lot of natural light coming in. You have a scope of ventilation. I'm just taking a rough example so that you understand how this works. So now you have understood that there is a scope of ventilation. You understood that there is a scope of light. Then you look at other aspects of the room. You might find elements which you can work with. Now, when you are a design thinker, you will automatically start to modify things in your head, imagine things a certain way in your head. Maybe you are already imagining the kind of color palette you want to build. You're already imagining the kind of the user interface that you're creating, right? So that refers to design thinking. There are five aspects of design thinking. There are five levels that you go through to find a solution to a problem, to look for an opportunity, or to think of a modification. In order to create a new design, you can either modify something which is already existing, you can invent something completely new, you can maybe upgrade something to another level, or you can also try to solve a problem which is existing in certain object. Let's take example of a computer. Now, when computers were invented, the problem was to kind of process information fast in a CPU or in a PC. That was the major problem. Now that the computers we are using are doing multiple things, so the new designs were the results of modifications. You might have started with Windows XP or Windows 2000, and now we are at 2010, and and more versions like that. So those designs have come as a result of modifications. As we were also studying in history of design, when we were looking at buildings which were upgraded to another level, right? So that sort of the result was coming from modification or upgradation. That is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is when you are working on a laptop, for example, you kind of realize that this is not as portable as something smaller. So the invention of iPad was there. There we were thinking about the size, the scale, so it was a problem. It was a problem for individuals to carry the laptop around. Like, for example, for interior designers, it is not possible for me to take this laptop on a site, is it? So I might use some papers, I might use my phone, I might use the iPad. So those sort of inventions were happening out of a need. So all of the designs that we do, I'm taking examples of objects, but same applies to interior design as well. Why do people start creating new houses? Why are they modifying their existing house? Many a times you will see that the reason might be they have a new family member, for example. Now they want to create another room for them. Second example, maybe the usage of the room which was earlier, maybe they were using it as a study room. Now they're also doing work from home. So now they want some modification in that. Or something which is very new is the automation. Now they want to use this new technology in their room. That is why they are recreating the room. So the new inventions can cause that change. There can be some modification to their needs. So all of those things can help you realize what is the root cause of the design you're doing. Then you can start to think about the design in a certain way. So let's take the first thing that we do when we are doing the design thinking process. First thing is empathize. Now I am going to talk about this in terms of interior design only. Let's think of a bedroom space that you are given and you have to create a space for a 7-year-old child, right? Now you as a designer need to empathize with the child. You need to empathize with the child's needs. You need to understand what what the child's routine is. How does he or she work throughout? What is their like, is he like somebody who's playful? Is it like somebody who's studious? So you are empathizing with the user. You're trying to recreate or create something which is really really helpful for that person. Now next thing is define. Now that you have understood the user, now that you have realized what are his key points, like what does he do in the whole day, now you can define the uses. Now you can define the different kind of spaces within the space. Now you can zone the space, like this is the play area, then here I'm going to put some study, here I'm going to put a bunk bed, maybe here I'm putting a slide, I want to create a stone wall. So all of those things are something that you define after you have understood the user. In terms of interior design, empathizing always mean that you are connecting with the user's needs and what is the objective of the space. Third part is ideate. Now that you have zoned the different areas, per se you want to create a study zone for your child and one you want to create a sleeping area. Now, what kind of ideas can you come up with to think about these two aspects? Maybe you want to create a stone wall, like a climbing wall for the kid. Maybe in terms of playway area, you're also thinking about a bouncy castle. You want to create a small castle for the child. Or you want to create a workshop area for the child where he is doing his coloring and he's doing his sketching and all of those things. So that is when you're ideating upon the definition that you have created. Now you have empathized with the user, you have defined their defined their needs, and now you're ideating about how to create that space for the user. Now the fourth aspect is prototype. Now that you have realized all of these things, now that you have come up with a few ideas that you want a bunk bed, you want a stone wall, you want XYZ things. Now you create your first draft, which is your first design. And in our profession, we kind of create these drafts, we create concepts, and we share with the client already. We are trying to find out if they like things or not. So the first step in our case is to create a concept mood board. So now at this stage, you're already creating a concept mood board. And finally, it comes to test. Now that you have created everything, you have put everything in place, finally the person, if they like it, if they're getting it built, you will see how the user responds to it. Maybe for this kid, you created a climbing wall, a stone climbing wall, and now after a few days or a few months, you can realize or understand if this is working out or not, if this is something which is okay or not. So in our case, it is very rare that we get to prototype things, but we need to prototype it in terms of 3D design so that we can understand if this is practically working or not, if this is practically useful or not, right? So this kind of design thinking also happens when we are working with objects. Let me ask you, like, have you seen certain objects modifying and updating throughout? Let's talk about Maggie, for example. When we started, this concept of 2-minute noodle was very new. This was an invention of a design or invention of a new object. But then the packaging kept on changing, and now we even have cup noodles, right? So, empathizing with the user, understanding what they want, and then creating ideas based on that, and finally prototyping it in the market, or prototyping it for yourself and testing it in the market. That's what people usually do. Sorry. Now, let me explain it with another example. Let's think of a space where you are designing for old people. Now, you are designing an old age home. Now, for the first step, for empathizing, you need to understand what age group are you working with. What are the main things that they suffer from? What are the things that they are good at? What are the things that they dislike about their existing home? So all of those things, when you realize or when you ask those questions or you research about it, that is when you are empathizing with the client. Second thing comes define. Now, when you have thought of all of these things, you have asked all of the right questions. Now you know that you need to take care of this home in a way that it is wheelchair accessible. It has some space which is, which is open to nature. You have space where they can walk around. You have space where maybe they can visit a doctor's clinic. Maybe you have a meditation zone. So now you are defining the kind of spaces that you might create in an old age home. Next up is ideation. Now that you have defined all of the needs that you have figured out, you can start to ideate. Now the meditation zone that I was talking about, how will you create the meditation zone? What should be the materials used? What should be the size of it? What should be the access to it? How should you connect it with the garden? So all of those things come under ideation. Then comes prototyping. Now that you have ideated, now that you have thought of the design, you have thought of how it should look, how the material should be, now you can create a 3D model to realize that this is how it is going to look. This is how it is going to feel like. Or if you are even more tech savvy, you can also create an augmented reality for the client, and you can make them walk into the scenarios and realize if this is something they want or not, right? So that could be prototyping in our scenario. And finally, when the prototype is approved, you test your theories. You create a sort of space which has all of these things that you thought about. Now you have created an old age home which has a meditation center, which has a garden, which has areas to stroll, which has areas for doctors to come in, which has a community center, for example. So all of those things, you have created a new kind of a system for an old age home. Now when you test it, is the final result that if this works or not. Maybe if it works, in the next project, whoever does it, they can take cues from your project and work on it further, right? Now that we have understood what design thinking is, let's take a look at this case study, which is Pediatric Hospital Ward redesigned by IDEO. Now, IDEO is a company that works on design thinking altogether. They are creating interior designs, they are creating solutions for all kinds of clients. So they have clients who are app developers, they have clients who are also just creating systems. They have clients who are MNCs. So it's a vast variety of clients that they have. And what they actually do is they use design thinking to solve a certain client's problem. So here the problem was the pediatric hospital ward that they were given to redesign. There were not good results in that ward. It was not like the hospital is not good or the doctors are not good enough. It was just that the retention of patients was difficult. They were not happy enough. So since it's a pediatric wards basically means when the kids are involved. So they wanted to create an environment for the kids which is, healthier for them, so that they don't feel like they are in an hospital, or they do not feel such pain in a way, that their emotional well-being, their mental health well-being should be there. So what these people did was, the first thing was they went on spending time with the people in pediatric wards. All the designers from some of the designers from IDEO, they went to the hospital and they talked to the people. They talked to the parents, they talked to the kids. They were trying to understand what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So that was the first step of them, which is empathizing. So they were trying to put themselves in their shoes. Second is define. Now they identified the core problem, that they wanted to create a healing environment that reduces stress for young patients. Now the patients were coming in for n number of diseases, but they had this certain kind of stress of being in an hospital environment. When any patient has this kind of stress, it is hard for them to recover fast. And they wanted faster recovery for the kids. So the definition of their problem was to create a healing environment that reduces stress for young patients. Then the ideas that they came up with are themed rooms. Instead of being in a room which is typically a hospital's room, which has all of those equipments around you, they try to tell them that let's create themed bedrooms. Let's create bedrooms which give them some sort of a warmth and some sort of a feeling of being at home, being healed at home. So then they also thought about interactive play areas. So now it's not like in a pediatric ward only one patient is going to be there. There are multiple patients. What if these bedridden souls or these people who are staying there, these kids could talk to each other, they could play together in a way which is controlled by the nurses, controlled by the doctors, but still they get some time with other children as well. So also the third part was improved natural lighting. They found that there was not enough natural lighting in all the wards of all the rooms of the kids. So they went on and gave them an idea that why don't you incorporate natural lighting. Now the fourth step was prototype. Now that they had created these ideas in their head, they went on creating sketches and 3D models. The one that you see on the right is also kind of a 3D model that they created, which they showcase the client that this is what they're imagining. They're imagining a lot of natural lighting coming in. They're imagining some sort of a study area also in the room, so that even the kid might have a sibling. So they might be staying with them or coming to play with them. So they have that interactive atmosphere. These were all the ideas that they came up with, and the prototype was through the sketches and 3D models. And finally, they tested that version. They just created one word with all of their ideas to understand if this is working or not. So that was the test part. And final results are still something that is going to happen later on. But for the design thinking part, these are the 5 things that need to be done, right? If you are trying to build something new, in many cases, it's not going to be like that you do it in a certain way. Sometimes you kind of empathize with the client later. You are just defining the problem in your head, and then you think, okay, now I feel like let's do this in a way, and then you empathize with the client. So it kind of does not work in a loop. It keeps on changing. So for many people, they start their design while ideating, and then they define their problem, right? So it can be different in different cases, but in this case study, it happened in a way which is also recommended, that you empathize, then you define, then you ideate, then you prototype, and finally you test. So when you're done with all of these things, it is, almost like something which is which we know is going to get results. So this is something that we recommend. But being a designer, everybody has their own way of learning and their own way of designing, so it can be different for different people. Now, another case study that I want to talk about is the Pacific Mall in Seattle. Now, here, the mall was working fine for a while, but then they started to see less visitors. They started to see the sales going down. So they tried to do a renovation in order to get it right. So, to understand what happened here is the first thing was they did an extensive user research. They interviewed the shoppers, they interviewed the retailers to find out what the problems are. This is always supposed to be the first step that you do. Second is they defined the key problems that the problems that they were identified were that there was lack of social spaces. Yes, there were spaces where people could shop, but there were not spaces where people could actually just sit and talk and relax and chill for a while. So in a mall, people don't usually come to only shop. They are also coming to pass their time. They are also coming to, have a fun time. So also they realized that the aesthetics were a little outdated. The mall used to look old. Now, if the mall looks old, nobody is going to want to click a picture there, right? So they need a newer atmosphere. That's what they realized. And the third was there was poor connectivity within the mall. Now, if you had to go from one place to another, people used to get confused. Where am I going to go from? Where is this staircase leading me to? So, all of those things were identified as problems. Then they ideated and they found that they could improve this while doing open plan spaces by getting improved wayfinding. So they kind of created these screens where people could just type in which store they wanted to go and they could find the way for that. Then there were interactive installations. They created installations all over the mall which were exciting to look at. People used to want to come there and get pictures clicked. And they also found a way to get more natural light in. It is important for any structure to have as much natural light as possible because that makes people comfortable. So, with all of these research and without all of these ideas, they then created a prototype with 3D models and they created some VR simulations to understand if this is working or not. And finally, they implemented some of their ideas in the mall just to figure out if these are working or not. And the final stage was when they implemented everything. So, see, you see how simple it gets when you are just identifying the problem, you're empathizing with the user, where you are kind of creating a problem statement for yourself. That's when you can actually create a design that helps somebody. So, it is very important for all of you to understand these 5 points. For the beginning, if you just follow this, you can still get a very good design for you. Now, let's discuss another case study which is from a hotel in India called the Dastavara Hotel by Shimul Javeri Kadri in Tirupati Balaji. Now, this hotel or this project I found very interesting because in here they were not looking for spaces or looking for things to empathize. They already had a brief from the client that the hotel's design needed to reflect the local culture and mythology. As we all know, Tirupati is a very mythologically important place, so they wanted to create a hotel that reflected the local culture, that reflected the Indianness. So the question was how to create a culturally symbolic hotel which had a modern design, which was really modern and really had all the accessibility and functionality. So what they did was they did a very interesting thing with the layout. They used the Tirupati Balaji temple layout and created some sort of a replica of that for the hotel. They used a middle block, a guest block, and a public block, which is similar to what happens in a mandir. And they used the middle part to create a water body. Now, as a modern architecture, as a modern architectural hotel, it can give you very many opportunities to create very serene environment, to create, nice spaces around a water body, which also symbolizes how temples were being made earlier. So, they used this temple orthogonality with carefully arranged pathways around a central water body, and they incorporated the designs with local crafts such as beadry and kalamkari art. We all know, or you must have seen in hotels, that they do have some sort of paintings, vases, and all of those things on the walls for different kinds of rooms, different kinds of restaurants. So, what they did was, their idea was to use only the local crafts for all of those paintings and art. Now, they found out the brief, they defined what their problem was, and their idea was to create a layout which was similar to the temple. They used those spaces to create a modern yet very nice, serene hotel. And finally, they used art from the local culture to add that richness in the space. And finally, they prototyped it with detailed models and mock ups of the spaces, the public spaces that they were creating. Unfortunately, for interior designers, it is not always possible to test their theories. It is not always possible to just, start from somewhere. If you're designing a complete project, you're designing a complete project. You have to have that confidence in your abilities, or you have to have that confidence in your prototypes that this is going to work. Now, after this, we are going to learn about so many things that will help you bring that confidence. We'll try to understand how the dimensions work, how these prototyping is done. While you are ideating, what are the tools that you can create? Now, ideas are just not vague ideas, how to make them into proper layouts or into proper drawings with dimensions where you can actually say that this will work.